Brazil is coming into the 2022 Qatar World Cup as one of the clear favorites, and it's obvious why. Brazil have one of, if not the most stacked lineup heading into the World Cup, with great depth at almost every position and very few weaknesses. Expectations for this team are a World Cup or bust, and their recent performances have shown that they're not a team that you want to face. Let's take a look at Brazil's tactics and the reason why they play some of the best international football. Looking at this Brazil squad, they usually set up in a formation consisting of a back four with two midfielders, where one is a holding midfielder and the other is more of a versatile box-to-box-esque midfielder. The rest of the squad is made up of a striker and two wide players, where their star Neymar usually takes up a position either in the front line or as more of a midfielder. These shapes usually take the form of a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, but Brazil's coach Tite has been favoring a 4-3-3 in most of their recent matches. Looking at Brazil's World Cup squad, we can see why their squad depth is so great. Alisson usually starts in net, with Ederson as a solid backup. Thiago Silva and Marquinhos usually take up the center back spots, with Militao and Bremer able to come in and cover if Tite wants some more speed at center back. Left back is covered by either Alex Sandro or Alex Telles, but Telles has been getting a majority of the recent starts, so expect him to be in Brazil's opening lineup. Right back is Brazil's weakest position, with Danilo and 39-year-old Dani Alves coming in to cover the position. I expect Danilo to get the start as he is a more traditional fullback, but we have seen Militao get a few appearances at the right back position for Brazil recently, so don't be surprised if you see him there. Casemiro is the key starting holding midfielder for Brazil, with Fabinho on the bench as a backup if they need to make a like-for-like change. The more versatile box-to-box midfielder has either been Fred or Paqueta in recent Brazil matches, with Bruno Guimaraes also as an option for the position on the bench. It seems that Tite likes to use Paqueta in the midfield when they defend in more of a mid-block 4-4-2, and he wants to be a little bit more offensively creative. Another note on Paqueta is his versatility, where he is featured as a striker, an outside midfielder, and in this box-to-box role for Brazil, and his inclusion in the squad has always been vital. Fred usually features in the midfield if Tite wants to go with a more solid midfield defensively, as we usually see Fred as the other midfielder when Brazil like to press in their 4-3-3 shape, while Paqueta again will be in the squad when they like to press in that 4-4-2 mid-block. Neymar is the star at the other midfielder position in this formation, and he plays in a very free role, allowing him to create anywhere on the pitch, but he usually favors that left half space role like he does with PSG. Vinicius Jr. has gotten most of the appearances as the left winger in Tite's recent matches, and Rafinha has similarly gotten appearances as the feature right winger. Richarlison has also been the starting striker for Brazil recently, with Gabriel Jesus on the bench to back him up, and as I mentioned earlier, Paqueta can also play in that striker role if they want more creativity. Antony and Rodrigo were brought into the squad as a few super subs that Brazil can employ deeper into games, and I expect Brazil to fully take advantage of the new 5 substitutions rule used at this World Cup. Looking at this Brazil squad in possession, their 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 typically morphs into a 2-3-5 or a 3-2-5 formation, something that we see very often from some of the best club teams around the world. Manchester City and Arsenal famously deployed the 2-3-5 system as it's a favorite of Pep Guardiola. You can see Neymar moving into that left half space, with the other versatile midfielder Fred moving into the other half space. The two fullbacks will move into the midfield with Casemiro as that single pivot, or the formation can be a 3-2-5 with one of the fullbacks moving into the midfield next to Casemiro, the same front 5, but keeping more of a defensive back 3 shape. In Brazil's recent match against Ghana, they lined up in a 4-2-3-1 formation, but you can see that when in possession, it still turns into that typical 2-3-5 formation that Brazil is known for. The fullbacks will take space on the outside, leaving Casemiro as the single pivot in the middle. Then you can see Neymar and Paqueta taking up those half spaces with Richarlison, Vinicius Jr., and Rafinha all in the front line. Casemiro always features here as the single pivot, however you will see Paqueta and or Fred dropping in to some provide support as a second pivot if they do need help moving out from the back. Against Japan, we saw Brazil using their typical 4-3-3 formation, and you can see once again that the fullbacks move up and it becomes their typical 2-3-5 formation when they're in possession. The reason Brazil are able to have so much success with this formation is because of the quality of the players at every position. When you have two world-class center backs like Marquinhos, Thiago Silva, a world-class pivot like Casemiro, then you have Neymar, Richarlison, Vinicius Jr., and Rafinha in your front line, you can afford to play a formation like this when you're in possession to create a ton of chances on goal. A key part of Brazil's attacking play is their fluidity. Neymar, as I said, is in a very free role where he's able to move anywhere throughout the pitch. You'll see him dropping in on the left side, dropping to the right side, dropping in to receive the ball and progress the ball forward, something that he regularly does for PSG. Because Neymar is playing in that left half space with Vinicius Jr. as a left winger, we often see Neymar and Vinicius combining on that left side with their movement to create chances down the left side. And when you have two players like Neymar and Vinicius Jr. coming at you down the left side, if you keep them man-marked in a 2v2 situation, you're going to have problems just like Ghana did against them. In Brazil's second goal against Ghana, you could really see the fluidity in action. Neymar moves in from the half space to the left winger, Telles moves all the way up next to him, Vinicius drops into Neymar's position in the half space, Paqueta has moved all the way from the right half space to the other side of Casemiro as another pivot, and as the play progresses, Neymar shifts all the way from the left wing position into the right half space, receives the ball, and plays Richarlison in for Brazil's second goal. Something that isn't talked about enough about this Brazil team is how comfortable everyone on the team is with the ball at their feet. Alisson in goal, with Thiago Silva and Marquinhos as the center backs and Casemiro as the pivot, Brazil are easily able to break any press that comes at them, and with pressing being so important in soccer today, I don't expect many teams to try and come out to press Brazil, as they're so good on the ball, they're extremely press resistant. Looking at Brazil in defense, once they lose possession, this 3-2-5 or 2-3-5 formation morphs into either a standard 4-3-3 or a standard 4-4-2. As I said earlier, with Fred in the midfield, Brazil looks to defend in a 4-3-3 because Fred is a much more solid defender in the middle. But if they have a player like Paqueta or Bruno in center mid, they might resort to a typical 4-4-2 where Neymar moves up into a striker position and they keep Paqueta and Casemiro as the two central midfielders, and they play more of a lower block to prevent better opposition from getting a lot more chances. This 4-4-2 is extremely solid, but they have been favoring pressing in that 4-3-3 formation as of late. You could see in their match against Ghana that Neymar would regularly move into that striker position next to Richarlison when they were in this 4-4-2 mid-block. So looking at the Paqueta-Fred midfielder choice, Tite opted for Paqueta in midfield against Ghana because of his versatility and attacking creativity. Paqueta would typically move into the right back position, help Militao build up on that right side, and allow Neymar to occupy the left side. This really helps Brazil build up on both sides of the field and makes him more of an attacking threat, as Paqueta can get into the box, and he's more of a threat going forward and creatively than Fred typically is. However, Fred offers a lot more defensively and when pressing. Something that Fred is known for at United is his ability to press forward and win the ball when their team is out of possession. Against Japan, Tite put Fred in midfield next to Casemiro in their 4-3-3 setup, and we could see him often intercepting key balls when Brazil was pressing high. So look out for Fred in midfield if Brazil want to win possession higher up the field. Again, this allows them to play a higher tempo defense, and in their specific game against Japan, we could also see Paqueta's versatility as he played as a right winger when Brazil were out of possession. Probably the only weakness of this team is their right side. Militao was playing right back against Ghana, but typically they'll have Danilo, and in worst case scenario, probably 39-year-old Dani Alves playing right back for Brazil. Although these aren't bad fullback options, this is definitely the weakest part of Brazil's squad, and against Ghana, Ghana would typically look to attack down Brazil's right side, and while they didn't have too much success because Brazil were extremely solid defensively, they did pose some chances, and this is definitely something to look out for at the World Cup with teams to take advantage of against Brazil. Looking at this Brazil side again, Brazil have come off the last few international breaks, looking like the best international team in the world. It's no surprise that they're favorites for this tournament, and if I had to predict where Brazil would end up, this Brazil squad is way too strong across the board and has too much depth to go out in the early stages. So don't be surprised if you see Brazil in the final, competing for the World Cup this year.